did you leave me? I was dazed.
Here. The title of my talk today is The Grandeur of the Holy Relationship. And, you know, in the Course in Miracles, there's that section that Reverend Vincent read, referring to grandeur and grandiosity. Grandeur is of God and grandiosity is of the ego. I don't really want to talk that much about grandiosity because I want to talk about grandeur and the holy relationship today. And how this talk came about was very interesting. It's always the Holy Spirit working through all of this. In a recent class, we read this section, and I said, after we read the section, you know, I'm the facilitator of the Thursday night class, and I said, you know, I don't have much to say. This section has never really connected to me. I don't have much to say about it, which I always have something to say about the section, usually first, because I'm the facilitator, you know, it's part of my role. And I said, so you guys comment on it. And it was Reverend Vincent who said to me, he said, well, wait a minute. Why, like he said, Peter, you know, we're on first name basis, but he said, Peter, like, I'm interested. Why don't you want to comment on this section? And I said, well, what is it about this section? I said, well, I don't really have that experience, like, you know, I of grandeur. Like I don't really connect to that. And then as we were discussing it, and other members of the class shared, oh no, I see you like this sometimes, and I see you here and there. And then I started reflecting on it. I was like, oh yeah, I guess I didn't really get the meaning of the word in a way. And so I did connect to it. And so it was a real kind of miracle for me, and lesson for me. And so let's take a look at the word. The word means, there are a couple definitions. So I kind of came up with a definition that blends them together. So here's one: splendor and impressiveness, especially of appearance and style. And the one word that is maybe a synonym for it that I thought was wonderful was magnificence. I think there's a song, there's even the song we read about, Tony Bennett's song on about the one on San Francisco, but it mentions the magnificence that was Rome. So yeah, magnificence. And I thought to myself, okay, how can I connect to that? And so I thought of, first of all, the natural world. And probably one of the magnificent sights I've ever seen is not that far from me here in San Francisco, and that is Yosemite National Park. And Half Dome. If you've ever been there and you've ever looked at it, it almost looks as if it's a movie. Like, it just seems so splendid, so incredibly, so large and beautiful. It has this kind of its own magnificence. Another one was the Grand Canyon. When I went to the Grand Canyon for the first time, coming from Arizona, you know, coming from Flagstaff and that part, that view of the Grand Canyon. I've seen it from the North Rim, but from that vantage point, I thought was amazing. And I talked about this before, my trip to Southern Utah this summer, the magnificence of the national parks there, Zion and Arches and Canyonlands, they all, these amazing natural rock formations, whether being large and the color and so on and so forth, it gives a sense of this magnificence. I also thought about, I'm a history person, and so I thought one of the people that came to mind was Abraham Lincoln. And Lincoln, you know, to me, whenever I see Lincoln portrayed well, or read something about Abraham Lincoln, he's definitely has this mystical quality. You know, he brought this wisdom to bear on the nation at a time when things were really, really kind of messed up, you know, in the Civil War, and we weren't even sure if we were going to remain together as a nation. And there was a recent film with Daniel Day-Lewis when he was the main character. It's called Lincoln, I believe. It was a play based on just one part when they were trying to get the 13th Amendment passed. And if you watch that character as we displayed it, he is president, but he's also someone that's kind of above the battlefield, that the Course the way the Course talks about it. And he was able to see, like, he didn't have rancor really, or resentment or grievance toward the Southerners. He wanted reconciliation, even if he disagreed with their political views and their legal arguments about the Constitution. So it was really kind of interesting. Another person comes to mind, and this is kind of on a little bit what we might call on the down low. Another historical figure of a little bit different political viewpoint is Thomas Jefferson. And I don't know if you know this, but Thomas Jefferson, for the last 25 years of his life, wrote a reinterpretation of the New Testament that some people refer to as the Jefferson Bible. And in fact, it was not meant to, it wasn't meant for public disclosure. He didn't want, it was more of a personal thing. And Jefferson was kind of a scholar. And what he did is he took the different languages of the Bible, especially the New Testament, the Greek, the Latin, perhaps the Arabic, I'm not sure, and the English, and he tried to distill the essence of what that was. And so, again, Thomas Jefferson is a person that reflected, I think, historically, the grandeur of God. And this is what he said about Jesus. And he said, Jesus's moral philosophy was this: there will be found remaining the most sublime and benevolent code of morals which has been offered to man. So what he did is he took what he felt was the authentic essence of Jesus's teachings, and he he rewrote this as what he thought Jesus really said. Now, what's amazing about this, he did this like over 200 years ago. And today, Christian scholars using scholarly approaches are doing the same thing. They're saying, okay, this is what, Jesus we could report that he actually said, and this is probably what he didn't say and was put in by the authors of the gospel. So it showed this real essence of things. So now that brings the question again back to what we talked about in my class the other day, is I really had to have this inner awareness. And I said, okay, when is it then that I feel my magnificence? When do I feel my grandeur? And of course, the first thing that comes to mind is when I give these talks, and it has been, my experience that, I'm much more comfortable with the talks now. But when I first started, there was a lot, it took me a lot longer to do them, but it was also, there was more kind of nervousness and anxiety about doing the talks, and now it's just like, I kind of wait and see what happens. I outline them, but I wait to see what, I think Spirit's working through us and see what happens, So, and it really just feels like I'm connected in a way that everything else everything else goes by the wayside, and that's what I think our magnificence is. It's when we're in our state of mind where nothing bothers us. And maybe like in the secular world, you hear that word when you're in your flow and everything is just going, and it doesn't matter like what other people are saying, what's going on in the world, you're just in that peace and joy and love. One way I connect to it is like when you're listening to the radio and every station you turn on and the music sounds good, you're in your flow. So, I have that experience. The other time I have that experience is when I'm teaching. And, which is why this whole, distance learning for me, many of you know I'm a teacher by trade during the week, and I teach this year mostly social studies. But, when I'm in that element, I just I feel like I come alive, and I feel like, I close that door in my classroom, or now I close the door in my bedroom because my bedroom is my classroom. And, I just feel like whoever shows up, we kind of start teaching. And it's been very, very interesting because, again, we're talking about magnificence and miracles. So how have things have also changed for me in the way I approach teaching. And it's been really interesting because what I committed to this year, now that I'm back to teaching social studies, was to go look at it with a broader lens, and that's one of the things that they're teaching us. So I thought it would be kind of interesting to look at that. And so one of the things I'm doing is teaching about the Constitution and early American history through a more inclusive lens. So how was it, traditionally it's taught, in some instances it's taught very much through a traditional, this is the American Revolution, the Constitution, the presidents, this is how we did things. But I'm also teaching it from the standpoint of, okay, well, let's see who in the beginning, who was participating in our democracy. And so I just looked up some statistics. And this is very, very interesting. So in our first presidential election, George Washington was elected president. Only 43,000 people voted, which was actually 0.017% of the population that actually voted for president. At the time, we had 3.9 million people in the country. Okay, so that was just very amazing. Now, the other thing to note, and we have to note this and be fair, that 43,000 represented 6.3% of the eligible voters. So, what did that mean? That meant back then, mostly only white male property owners could vote. Okay, so our democracy in its very beginning was very exclusive, exclusive of, women, exclusive, of course, the slaves, free Black men, or people that didn't own property. So most people were not included back then. And so, it's like, again, it's looking at these things with a lens, not necessarily to critique, but also to see it as a part of a greater historical understanding of things. And so, that's been really good for me, is to kind of increasing my my lens as I go about doing these kinds of things. Okay, in today's reading, it says this: in this world, God's Son comes closest to himself in a holy relationship. There he begins to find the certainty his Father has in him. And so what struck me about this is really what A Course in Miracles is telling us, is that, in some instances, sometimes we're given these spiritual paradigms, like models, the guru going to the cave in the Himalayas and being self-realized, gaining enlightenment. But the Course in Miracles really says that's not the fastest way to enlightenment. That's not the fastest way to your peace and your joy and your communion with God. The fastest way is to heal your relationships, really. The fastest way to God is to realize the innocence of your brothers and sisters. That is how you get your grandeur. That's how you experience it. And, I've been recently guided over the past couple months to reflect on this, reflect on some past friendships that I've had and some past romantic personal relationships I've had in my life. I don't know why, Holy Spirit does these things, right? You get this, and so I've been journaling about them. And the amazing thing about it is how healing it's been. It's been incredibly healing. And what I've been able to see was I was above the battlefield. Like I could see past grievances that I had, or hurts or wounds, from these things. I could see, I was writing about, the other person was experiencing X, Y, and Z. Like I could see the other person's point of view. And I could see, how innocent both of us, all of us were, I mean, sometimes involved other folks too, like it's, we're family, so it's encounter, it's having other people involved too. And you're like, oh, wow. Like, and in the moment you're like, oh, that person is wrong. That person's harming me. How could they do this? But from that above the battlefield perspective that the Course asks us to get, which is our own version of the Holy Spirit's perspective, right? Everything that is happening in the moment at that time is healed or healing. And the closer that we can get to those experiences, the better that we can do. um, I can recall, just recently in my workplace, we had some big changes. This year we were taken over. Not, I shouldn't say taken over. That's not a good word. Actually, upon my advocacy, the school district took more responsibility for our school site. We were a specialized program, and they came and they took, they came back in, and now we have more resources from the school district, and that's a blessing. And then but there's also some, from perspective of my ego, there's some loss because now there's less autonomy. I had more influence over the program before, and now I kind of have a little less because we have some more oversight from the district. And so there's been some significant changes, and my ego doesn't like change, especially when it opposes my ideology of how things should be. And some of that I have to push back on. Like, some spirit guides me to push back on it, but all of it is okay. And I've had some experiences where I did act out of my ego. Like sometimes, in the past, my other positions, I've had to write emails to everybody in the school district because I felt there was an injustice going on, so I have this pattern of doing that. And, I wrote this one email a couple of weeks ago, and my supervisor said, "Why don't you just call me?" Why don't you just, I'm like, oh, yeah, I don't know, because I'm used to fighting this way, and she was like, "Yeah, you can just call me. I'm perfectly fine talking about it." So, that's part of our grandeur too. And that's part of every relationship, is a holy relationship when we turn it over to the Holy Spirit. A Course in Miracles, of course, we can't, I have to be honest. I have a love-hate relationship with the school district that I'm part of, our school district, San Francisco Unified School District. And because sometimes I feel it's a big school district, 50,000 kids, 5,000 employees, with this distance learning, they've done things, or they've said things, they make these rulings or whatever, and you're supposed to follow them. And, I got 30 years teaching experience. I think I know what's right. And I'm like, screw you, I'm not doing that, and sometimes you can get away with it because there's just too much for them to monitor. But sometimes, I have to, I have to do certain things. But, what the Course in Miracles says is, like, that's my special hate relationship, right? When I get in my ego about judging my employer, which means I'm condemning, I'm judging, I'm angry. Am I experiencing my grandeur at that time? Am I experiencing my joy and peace and seeing everyone as innocent and loving? No. I'm not. Okay. So we just have to be kind of clear about that. And so the beauty of it all, of course, is that I'm a Course in Miracles student, and I know my grandeur, and I know that this relationship, even, we have relationships obviously with other people, and for me they're more important, but we also have unhealed relationships with institutions, and with events that took place in our lives that may not just be on one person. So the Course in Miracles really does provide, kind of these opportunities for us. Everything that we have a relationship to is already healed according to Course in Miracles. In time, at some point in the horizontal timeline, it's healed. Although it may not appear to be healed right at this moment, but we are inspired to get back to our grandeur, because the sooner we start on the healing, the sooner it will heal. And that's what we know. And it's okay, like, for me to be in my resistance sometimes and shoot off that email, right? It's okay. Whatever happens, happens, and that includes if I get reprimanded or I get fired or whatever. Not that I don't usually go that far, but what we do, everything seen through the lens of the Holy Spirit, it's okay. Like, even these things that seem to happen, COVID, that seems to happen in our world, is for healing purposes. And yes, we can judge it, we can condemn it, but in truth, it's for our healing. I had a great healing experience on Saturday. I went to the barbers. I went back to my barber shop for the first time, because in San Francisco, you're now allowed to do this. And I go to this place. It's called Great Clips. It's like, one of these discount hair cutting places, right? But I'm friends with it's mostly Vietnamese ladies that are in there. And I'm friends with all of them, And I went in and only two of them were there because business has, had not been great. And I thought, oh my God, I better get there first thing. Because I'm imagining everybody's going to get their hair cut like me, it's first chance I had to get a haircut. But it was just great to see. I saw Nancy, who's like my favorite one. And, in these kinds of places, you can't really get the person you want. You just luck of the draw. So what happened was I went in and the other person, there was two of them at that time. Usually there's like 4 or 5 on a Saturday, but there was 2. And so, but I interacted with them. I had a fun time. It was great to get a haircut, but even better, it was just to see my friends, it was to see these people I haven't seen for 6 months. And like my prayer was like, so I asked the woman that was cutting my hair, I said, well, how much of your business has returned? And she said, well, like about 40%, and so I was just thinking to myself, like my prayer is that more people will feel comfortable and willing to go and get their hair cut again, and give these folks, give them back their livelihood. And that's as far, that's what I can do. I can go and I can get my hair cut, and then I can hope for them. And they took all those, safety precautions. And in fact, this is for the woman that cut my hair had a mask on, and she had a visor as well. And I said, good for her, yeah, we want you to feel safe and feel good about doing it. So, again, that's what we really need to do. We really need to, when we have these opportunities that are presented to us, in all of our relationships, go for the grandeur, right? Go for the gusto, as they say, and see every relationship, even the ones that are the hardest for us to handle. Your employer, your supervisor, whatever past you have to heal, do it. I've been, again, kind of inspired. I want to mention this quote from King Lear, because I'd mentioned in one of my other talks, but this time I finally looked it up because it was so profound and so Course in Miracles like. So it's a part of the play. It's a Shakespearean play. King Lear, he just discovers that his daughters have betrayed him and been selfish and cruel to him. And this is what he says: your old kind father, whose frank heart gave all. He pauses. Oh, that way madness lies. Let me shun that. No more of that. He was beginning to go into self-pity about what his daughters had done. He was beginning to go into judgment. He was beginning to go into sadness and despair. And he stopped himself. No, I'm not going into the ego. I'm going to choose grandeur and the holy relationship. And so let us be like King Lear. Let us shun the ego and embrace our grandeur. And that's my talk for today.
I just want to give to you the perfect gift today. I just want to give to you the gift of joy today. I just want to give to you the gift